In this episode, we dive into the most horrifying shark attacks. From a family that crashed into the shark-infested waters of California, to a Navy diver who turned into shark food after facing a great white shark. The morning of June 3, 2015 brought ideal conditions to Jupiter, Florida's famous shark diving grounds. Crystal clear water stretched endlessly beneath a brilliant blue sky, with visibility extending to over 100 feet in every direction. For Jessica Chen, 31, preparing her gear on the dive boat's deck, it looked like another perfect day to share her passion for sharks with a group of eager underwater adventurers. Jessica embodied the kind of calm confidence that made nervous divers feel safe and experienced ones respect her expertise. With 8 years as a PADI-certified dive instructor and over 300 shark dives under her belt, she had earned a reputation as one of South Florida's most knowledgeable and safety-conscious dive professionals. Her colleagues at Jupiter Dive Center often joked that Jessica could read shark behavior like others read books, understanding the subtle body language and environmental cues that indicated whether an encounter would be peaceful or potentially dangerous. Jessica's approach to shark diving was methodical and educational. Regular clients requested Jessica specifically, knowing that her dives combined safety with incredible wildlife viewing opportunities. The group Jessica was leading that morning consisted of 6 experienced divers, all with advanced certifications and previous shark diving experience. They had specifically requested a tiger shark encounter, hoping to observe the large predators that frequented Jupiter's waters during the summer months. Jessica had explained during the pre-dive briefing that they were diving at the known tiger shark feeding aggregation site, where the predators gathered to hunt in the nutrient-rich waters where the Gulf Stream met the continental shelf. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, second only to great whites in terms of documented attacks on humans. These massive animals can grow to over 16 feet in length and weigh more than 1,400 pounds, with distinctive dark stripes that fade as they mature. Unlike many shark species that have specific dietary preferences, tiger sharks are opportunistic feeders, earning them the nickname wastebasket of the sea for their willingness to eat almost anything. At 11:45 a.m., Jessica led her group down to the sandy bottom 60 feet below the surface. The dive site was a known tiger shark aggregation area where the predators gathered to hunt in the nutrient-rich waters created by the convergence of different current systems. The water was exceptionally clear, offering perfect visibility for observing and photographing the magnificent creatures they hoped to encounter. Within minutes of reaching the bottom, Jessica spotted what they had come to see. A massive female tiger shark, easily 12 feet long, gliding through the water with the effortless grace that made these predators so mesmerizing to watch. The shark appeared calm and curious, displaying the typical behavior Jessica had observed in hundreds of previous encounters. She signaled to her group to maintain their standard distance of 15 feet. Using hand signals to indicate they should remain stationary and allow the shark to approach if it chose to do so. What Jessica couldn't have anticipated was the presence of a large, injured fish struggling near the bottom just outside her field of view. A wounded barracuda, likely injured by another predator earlier that morning, was creating exactly the kind of distress signals that trigger feeding responses in tiger sharks. The shark's demeanor changed instantly when it detected the wounded fish. Its movements became more focused and aggressive, its body language shifting from curious investigation to active hunting mode. Jessica immediately signaled for her group to move away from the area, but the shark was already committed to investigating the source of the distress signals. In its heightened predatory state, the massive tiger shark perceived Jessica's position between herself and the wounded fish as a potential threat to its feeding opportunity. The animal's response was swift and devastating. The attack was sudden and overwhelming. The tiger shark covered the distance between itself and Jessica in seconds, its powerful tail propelling its massive body forward with explosive speed. Jessica had no time to react before the shark's jaws clamped down on her torso. The serrated teeth designed for cutting through tough prey, penetrating deep into her chest and abdomen. The shark's powerful neck muscles engaged, shaking Jessica violently in the classic predatory behavior that tiger sharks use to subdue their prey. Jessica's dive buddy, positioned just 20 feet away, immediately signaled distress and began swimming toward the attack. The other divers, witnessing the horrific scene unfolding before them, followed emergency protocols Jessica had drilled into them during countless safety briefings. They formed a protective circle and began making noise by banging on their tanks, a technique designed to discourage further aggressive behavior from the shark. The tiger shark released Jessica after approximately 8 seconds of violent shaking. The massive predator, having delivered what it perceived as a defensive response to protect its feeding opportunity, swam toward the wounded barracuda, leaving Jessica floating motionless in the water. Her dive buddy reached Jessica first. She was unconscious and bleeding severely from the massive wounds to her torso, but she still had a weak pulse. The group began a controlled emergency ascent, following decompression protocols even in their panic, knowing that a rapid ascent could cause additional life-threatening complications. Breaking the surface, the divers immediately called for the dive boat while beginning rescue breathing and first aid procedures. Jessica remained unconscious throughout the 8-minute boat ride back to shore, her dive buddy maintaining rescue breathing while other divers applied pressure to her wounds in a desperate attempt to control the massive bleeding. Despite the quick response of her dive team and the immediate medical attention she received upon reaching shore, Jessica Chen died from massive trauma and blood loss before she could be transported to a hospital. Jessica's death led to significant changes in shark diving operations throughout South Florida. New protocols were implemented requiring dive guides to scan for wounded or distressed marine life before beginning shark encounters, enhanced pre-dive briefings about predatory behavior triggers, and improved emergency response equipment on all dive boats. The morning of May 8, 2017 dawned with crystalline clarity over the Florida Keys. The sun rose like a golden orb over the Atlantic Ocean, its rays penetrating the gin-clear water, illuminating the sandy bottom and the scattered coral heads in the shallow flats. Carlos Mendez had been anticipating this trip for weeks. At 31 years old, Carlos represented the new generation of spear fishermen who combined traditional hunting skills with modern technology and deep respect for marine conservation. He had spent 8 years developing his skills, starting with basic freediving courses and progressing to advanced techniques under experienced mentors. His equipment reflected this serious approach, including a custom spear gun capable of accurate shots up to 15 feet. This morning, Carlos was diving with his younger brother Miguel in the shallow grass flats near Key Largo, an area known for its excellent hogfish and mutton snapping hunting in water depths ranging from 3 to 8 feet. Even in these shallow waters, tiger sharks are among the most dangerous species to spear fishermen. These apex predators can grow up to 18 feet long and weigh over 2,000 pounds. They possess uniquely designed teeth with serrated edges that can slice through flesh, bone, and turtle shells. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are opportunistic feeders, willing to investigate any potential food source, making them particularly dangerous to spear fishermen who create blood trails. Tiger sharks are notorious for hunting in surprisingly shallow water, often patrolling grass flats and reef edges in depths as shallow as 3 to 4 feet. That day, Carlos and Miguel launched their boat from Key Largo Marina at 6 a.m. as they anchored in the shallow flats in just 6 feet of water. For the first hour, the experience was a success, working with shallow coral heads and grass beds. However, as their success continued, each speared fish released a small amount of blood into the water, creating a cumulative scent trail detectable to sharks from considerable distances. Around 10 a.m., Carlos spotted a large grouper hiding under a coral ledge in about 4 feet of water, roughly 40 feet from Miguel's position. He decided to pursue it alone rather than signal his brother, violating a fundamental safety rule of spearfishing. The shot was flawless. Carlos's spear struck the grouper just behind the head, killing it instantly. But as he secured the large fish to his stringer in the shallow water, significant blood began flowing from the wound, creating a much more substantial scent trail than his previous catches. This is when Carlos didn't realize that his successful morning had been observed by a predator following the scent trail for over an hour. An 11-foot tiger shark, a mature female weighing approximately 800 pounds, had been tracking the brothers from deeper water and had moved into the shallow flats to investigate the blood trail. The attack came without warning in just 4 feet of water. The massive shark's dorsal fin broke the surface as it closed the distance in seconds, its powerful tail propelling its body through the water with surprising speed. Carlos managed to fire a spear gun, but the weapon's effectiveness against fish was inadequate against an 800-pound predator in such confined spaces. The shark's jaws clamped down on Carlos's right arm and shoulder, serrated teeth cutting through the toughest materials. The bite severed Carlos's brachial artery, the major vessel supplying his arm with blood. After about 20 to 30 seconds, the shark released its grip and backed away slightly, its massive body thrashing in the shallow water. But the tiger shark wasn't finished. The second attack targeted Carlos's legs and lower torso, the shark's powerful body creating a violent disturbance in the shallow flats. The combined blood loss from both attacks now exceeded 1 liter per minute, rapidly pushing Carlos toward fatal hypovolemic shock. Miguel, who could clearly see the attack happening in the shallow, clear water, began swimming toward their boat while calling for help, hoping to reach the radio and summon emergency assistance. The sight of his brother being attacked by the massive predator in such shallow water was even more terrifying than if it had happened in deep water. By the time he reached the boat and radioed for help, Carlos had already lost consciousness from massive blood loss and was floating face down in less than 5 feet of water. The Coast Guard response was swift, with rescue boats and a helicopter arriving within 20 minutes of Miguel's distress call. But the search quickly became a recovery operation rather than a rescue mission. The victim's body clearly visible in the shallow, crystal clear water. Carlos Mendez was pronounced dead at the scene, losing his life due to blood loss from multiple arterial lacerations from shark bite trauma in the deceptively dangerous shallow waters of the Florida Keys. The afternoon of October 8, 2013 brought perfect conditions to the water surrounding Guadalupe Island, Mexico. Crystal clear visibility extended for over 100 feet in every direction, while the absence of wind created the calm surface conditions that cage diving operators dream of. For Michael "Shark Mike" Thompson, 35, it was exactly the kind of day that reminded him why he had chosen to make his living bringing tourists face to face with the ocean's most magnificent predators. Michael was an experienced shark cage diving guide who had been working the waters around Guadalupe Island for 4 years. His marine biology degree and dive master certification made him uniquely qualified to educate tourists about great white shark behavior while keeping them safe during their underwater encounters. Clients appreciated his genuine respect for the animals and his encyclopedic knowledge of individual sharks that frequented the area. Friends and colleagues described Michael as safety obsessed, the kind of guide who checked and double-checked every piece of equipment before each dive. He had personally supervised thousands of cage dives without a single serious incident, earning a reputation as one of the most reliable operators in the business. His passion for shark conservation was evident in every briefing he gave, and many clients left Guadalupe Island with a newfound respect for these apex predators thanks to Michael's educational approach. Michael had been particularly excited about this trip because several of the island's most famous resident sharks had been spotted in recent days, including Deep Blue, a massive female estimated to be over 20 feet long. He'd been photographing and cataloging the sharks around Guadalupe for years, contributing valuable data to marine research organizations. His clients often remarked that Michael seemed to have a personal relationship with many of the sharks, recognizing individuals by their unique markings and behavioral patterns. The morning had started perfectly, with multiple shark sightings and enthusiastic clients who were getting the experience of a lifetime. Michael had conducted 3 successful cage dives already, each one providing spectacular close encounters with great whites. His safety record was impeccable. In 4 years of operation, he'd never had so much as a minor injury occur on one of his trips, a testament to his meticulous attention to detail and conservative approach to risk management. At 2:30 p.m., Michael was conducting a routine cage diving tour with 6 excited clients, all of whom had traveled thousands of miles for the chance to see great white sharks in their natural habitat. The day had been exceptional. Multiple sharks had visited the cage, including a massive 17-foot female that the crew had nicknamed Isabella. The clients were thrilled with their close encounters, and Michael was preparing for the final dive of the day when a seemingly minor equipment issue would escalate into tragedy. As Michael performed his standard pre-dive safety check, he noticed that one of the cage's secondary locking pins had worked loose, a minor maintenance issue that normally would require only a few minutes to fix. The massive female great white circled nearby, her behavior calm and predictable as she investigated the cage structure. Michael had seen this behavior thousands of times before and felt completely safe making the quick repair while the clients watched from the boat. Working methodically as always, Michael tightened the loose pin and tested the door mechanism to ensure it was functioning properly. What he didn't notice was that the constant motion of the waves had caused metal fatigue in the door's primary hinge, a microscopic crack that had been developing over months of regular use. As Michael pushed against the door to test its security, he was unaware that the great white circling below possessed a bite force of over 4,000 pounds per square inch, more than enough to crush a small car. These apex predators have evolved rows of razor-sharp, serrated teeth that continuously regenerate throughout their lifetime, with some individuals shedding over 35,000 teeth in their lifespan, each one designed to slice through flesh and bone with surgical precision. The weakened hinge finally gave way completely, and the door swung open with sudden violence. Michael, caught off balance by the unexpected movement, fell backward out of the cage. In that split second, he found himself in open water just yards from one of the ocean's most powerful predators. The great white, startled by the sudden splash and movement, reacted with the lightning-fast reflexes that have made these sharks the ocean's most efficient hunters. The attack was swift and devastating, a single powerful bite that inflicted massive trauma before the shark immediately retreated, likely realizing that Michael wasn't its preferred prey. This behavior is typical of great white encounters with humans. They investigate with a bite, then usually disengage when they realize the mistake. But for Michael, floating in the water with catastrophic injuries, that single bite was fatal. The boat crew immediately threw life rings and initiated emergency procedures, but Michael had lost consciousness within seconds of the attack. The massive trauma to his torso and the rapid blood loss made rescue efforts futile. By the time the crew pulled him from the water, Michael had already succumbed to his injuries. The great white had disappeared into the depths, its brief investigation complete. Michael's death was ruled an accident caused by equipment failure, specifically the metal fatigue in the cage door hinge that hadn't been detected during routine inspections. The incident led to mandatory daily stress testing of all cage components and the implementation of backup safety mechanisms for all cage diving operations at Guadalupe Island. Michael's tragedy served as a sobering reminder that even the most experienced professionals are vulnerable when mechanical failure puts them in direct contact with apex predators. The afternoon of September 12, 2013 brought perfect beach conditions to Daytona Beach, Florida. The sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, warming white sand to comfortable temperatures. A steady onshore breeze created ideal wave conditions, with consistent 3 to 4 foot swells rolling in from the Atlantic at regular intervals. Michael Chan had been looking forward to this fall break trip for months, carefully coordinating schedules with college friends to ensure they could all make the journey from the University of Central Florida in Orlando to Daytona Beach. At 24 years old, Michael was in his final semester as a business major, with plans to graduate in December and begin his marketing career with a Tampa firm. Michael had discovered bodyboarding during sophomore year when a roommate introduced him to the sport during spring break at Cocoa Beach. Over 3 years, Michael had become an accomplished bodyboarder, investing in quality equipment and spending countless weekends at various Florida beaches perfecting his technique. What made this trip particularly significant was the timing. September represented the peak of what locals called blacktip season, when thousands of blacktip sharks migrated through Florida's coastal waters following massive schools of bait fish. Blacktip sharks typically measure 4 to 6 feet in length and weigh 40 to 60 pounds. They're generally not considered dangerous to humans under normal circumstances, preferring to feed on small, schooling fish. However, during their feeding migrations, blacktips become significantly more aggressive and less discriminating about potential prey. Michael and his friends had arrived at Daytona Beach 2 days earlier, spending their first day getting oriented and their second day enjoying relatively calm conditions perfect for beginners. But September 12th brought the kind of wave conditions that experienced bodyboarders dream about. Consistent sets with clean faces and enough power to provide long, exciting rides. The group had spent the morning exploring the beach and testing different spots before settling on an area about a half a mile south of the main pier, where waves seemed to be breaking most consistently. This location put them in an area that local fishermen knew was frequented by large schools of mullet, the primary prey species that attracted blacktip sharks during their migration. By 2 p.m., Michael was having the session of his trip. He had been in the water for over an hour, catching wave after wave and feeling completely in tune with the ocean's rhythm. What Michael and his friends didn't realize was that they were bodyboarding in the middle of a massive feeding aggregation of blacktip sharks. Underwater, dozens of these sleek predators were pursuing schools of mullet that had been driven into shallow water by larger predatory fish offshore. The attack came without warning during what should have been a routine rest in 6-foot deep water. Michael was scanning the horizon when he felt a sudden violent impact on his right leg. The blacktip shark, measuring about 4 feet in length and weighing around 40 pounds, had struck from below with the speed and precision that made these sharks effective predators. The shark's teeth, while smaller than those of larger species, were perfectly designed for gripping and tearing flesh. When they penetrated Michael's calf and ankle, they caused deep lacerations that severed muscles and blood vessels, creating wounds that would have been serious even with immediate medical attention. Michael's scream of pain and shock carried across the water to his friends, who immediately recognized something was terribly wrong. Jake, who had been bodyboarding about 50 yards away, began swimming toward Michael while shouting for others to call for help. The blacktip shark, having delivered its bite, immediately released Michael and disappeared back into the depths. This behavior is typical of blacktip attacks on humans. They usually deliver a single bite before realizing their mistake and retreating. Michael, despite excruciating pain and the shock of the attack, managed to maintain his grip on his bodyboard and began making his way toward shore. Jake reached Michael just as he was entering the shore break, helping to support him as they navigated the final yards to the beach. The wounds on Michael's right leg were severe and bleeding profusely. The shark's bite had caused deep lacerations to his calf and ankle, with significant tissue damage that required immediate attention. Daytona Beach's emergency response system was well prepared for shark attack incidents. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes of the 911 call, immediately beginning treatment to control bleeding and stabilize Michael's condition for transport. Michael was conscious and talking during the initial treatment, describing the attack to paramedics and expressing concern about whether his friends were safe to continue swimming. The transport to Halifax Medical Center took about 15 minutes, during which Michael's condition began to change. However, complications began developing within 12 hours of surgery. Despite the successful arterial repair, Michael began showing signs of compartment syndrome in his lower leg. Michael underwent emergency fasciotomy surgery to relieve the pressure, but the damage had already begun. Most critically, Michael began developing signs of systemic inflammatory response syndrome. The medical team suspected that marine bacteria introduced during the shark bite had caused a serious infection. Despite aggressive antibiotic therapy and supportive care, Michael's condition continued to deteriorate. On the evening of September 13th, approximately 30 hours after the attack, Michael went into cardiac arrest. The medical team worked for over 45 minutes to restore his heartbeat. They were successful in getting his heart beating again, but Michael had suffered significant brain damage due to the period without adequate oxygen circulation. Michael remained on life support for 2 more days while his family grappled with the devastating news that he had suffered irreversible brain damage. His other organs continued to fail despite maximum medical support, and it became clear that he would not recover. Michael Chen was pronounced dead at 3:17 p.m. on September 15, 2013, 3 days after what should have been a routine bodyboarding session with friends. The official cause of death was multiple organ failure secondary to septic shock caused by marine bacterial infection from shark bite trauma. He was 24 years old, just months away from graduating college and beginning his career. It was June 22, 2016, when the research vessel Deep Current anchored in the crystal clear waters surrounding Guadalupe Island, Mexico. The remote volcanic island rose dramatically from the Pacific Ocean, its rugged cliffs casting long shadows across the surface as morning light filtered through the marine layer. These waters, known for their exceptional visibility and abundant seal populations, had become a premier destination for great white shark research. The island's isolation, located 150 miles off the Baja California coast, created perfect conditions for studying these apex predators in their natural habitat. Strong currents carried nutrient-rich waters around the island's perimeter, supporting a thriving ecosystem. Micah Reeves, a 41-year-old marine researcher with 15 years of field experience, had brought his team to these waters for a critical tagging expedition. His reputation for advanced shark conservation research was built on calculated risks and innovative approaches that other scientists deemed too dangerous. Leading 3 graduate students, Micah specialized in shark behavior patterns and had developed new satellite tagging techniques that provided unprecedented data on great white migration routes. The team had been tracking a particularly large female specimen for 3 days, waiting for the optimal moment to attach their tracking device. His colleagues often described him as brilliant, but sometimes reckless. Great white sharks are the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of reaching lengths exceeding 20 feet and weights of over 5,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are perfectly designed for explosive bursts of speed, reaching up to 35 miles per hour when attacking prey. These ancient hunters possess rows of razor-sharp triangular teeth that can exert bite forces exceeding 4,000 pounds per square inch. Their keen senses allowed them to detect electrical fields from living creatures and smell blood from miles away. Female great whites are typically larger and more aggressive than males, especially when establishing territorial dominance in feeding areas. Their hunting strategy relies on ambush attacks from below, using their powerful tails to propel themselves toward prey. The massive female they have been observing measured an estimated 16 feet in length, displaying increasingly territorial behavior as the morning progressed. She had been circling the research vessel aggressively for over an hour, her dorsal fin cutting through the surface with deliberate precision. The shark's behavior patterns indicated heightened aggression, likely triggered by the scent of bait fish the team had been using to attract her closer to their observation platform. Her movements became more erratic and unpredictable as feeding time approached, a clear warning sign that experienced researchers typically heeded. Despite warnings from his graduate students about the shark's unusual territorial displays, Micah made the fatal decision to enter the water without proper cage protection. He believed his experience in the shark's predictable circling pattern would allow him sufficient time to attach the satellite tag using their extended tagging pole. As he slipped into the water with his equipment, the massive predator immediately altered her behavior, turning toward him with unmistakable intent. The great white charged directly at Micah with explosive speed, her powerful tail propelling her massive frame through the water. The initial attack targeted his right arm as he attempted to position the tagging pole. The shark's triangular teeth, each measuring over 2 inches in length, severed his arm completely at the elbow joint. The tagging equipment sank rapidly as blood poured into the surrounding water, creating a crimson cloud that triggered the predator's feeding response. Micah's severed limb floated momentarily before disappearing into the depths as massive blood loss began affecting his consciousness. The great white attacked again within seconds, this time clamping her powerful jaws around his torso. The crushing force of her bite punctured his chest cavity, her teeth penetrating deep into his ribcage and damaging multiple vital organs, including his lungs and heart. The predator began thrashing violently, her natural feeding behavior taking control as she dragged Micah underwater. Each powerful movement of her head caused additional trauma to his already devastated torso. The combination of massive blood loss from his severed arm, catastrophic organ damage from the chest wounds, and water entering his punctured lungs created a fatal cascade of injuries. Within 4 minutes of the first bite, Micah Reeves succumbed to his injuries in the depths surrounding Guadalupe Island. The Mexican authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident, focusing on safety protocols for marine research operations. The research community mourned the loss of a dedicated scientist whose work had significantly advanced understanding of great white behavior patterns. The morning of September 14, 2018 brought ideal conditions to the waters 15 miles west of Camp Pendleton, California. Calm seas and excellent visibility created perfect conditions for the advanced underwater infiltration training exercise that would test the skills of some of the Marine Corps' most elite operators. For Staff Sergeant Marcus Johnson, 28, it was just another day of pushing the boundaries of what was possible beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Marcus was a Marine Force reconnaissance operator with 6 years of military diving experience and over 100 training dives under his belt. His fellow Marines respected his technical expertise and calm demeanor under pressure, qualities that have made him a natural choice for the most challenging underwater missions. Growing up in rural Montana, Marcus had never seen the ocean until he joined the Marines, but he had taken to underwater operations with natural aptitude. His instructors noted his exceptional breath control and his ability to remain calm in high-stress situations. He had completed advanced courses in underwater navigation, combat diving, and equipment maintenance, earning certifications that qualified him for the most sensitive reconnaissance missions. Marcus had been looking forward to this particular training exercise because it would test new navigation techniques he'd been developing. He'd spent weeks studying the underwater topography of the training area and had even practiced the route in the swimming pool back at base. His attention to detail was legendary among his unit. He was the kind of Marine who memorized backup plans for his backup plans, and his teammates often joked that Marcus could navigate underwater blindfolded. The night before the exercise, Marcus had spent hours meticulously checking his rebreather system, testing every component, and running diagnostic checks on the CO2 scrubber that would keep him alive during the extended underwater mission. He'd been using a closed-circuit rebreather for 3 years and had never experienced a significant malfunction. But his training had taught him that equipment failure was always a possibility in the unforgiving marine environment. At 11:15 a.m., Marcus was conducting an underwater navigation exercise using a closed-circuit rebreather with his dive buddy positioned 50 yards away as per standard protocol. The exercise was routine. Navigate to a series of underwater waypoints while maintaining communication with his partner. Marcus had completed similar exercises dozens of times, but on this day, his rebreather began to malfunction in a way that would prove catastrophic. The CO2 scrubber in Marcus's rebreather failed gradually, allowing dangerous levels of carbon dioxide to build up in his breathing loop. The symptoms came on slowly at first, slight confusion and shortness of breath that Marcus initially attributed to exertion. But within minutes, the CO2 poisoning was affecting his judgment and motor skills. Following emergency protocols, Marcus signaled his dive buddy and began an emergency ascent to the surface. Marcus surfaced in an area where elephant seals had been feeding throughout the morning, though the marine wildlife briefing had been delayed due to administrative issues. As he floated on the surface, struggling to clear his rebreather and signal for pickup, Marcus was unaware that a 15-foot great white had been patrolling the seal colony just beneath the surface. Great whites are perfectly evolved killing machines, unchanged for millions of years, with the ability to detect electrical impulses as weak as 0.5 billionth of a volt, roughly equivalent to the electrical field of a flashlight battery connected to electrodes placed 1,000 miles apart in the ocean. This incredible sensitivity allows them to detect the heartbeat of a seal from remarkable distances, making them nearly impossible to evade once they've locked onto a target. His black wetsuit and erratic movements at the surface closely resembled the wounded seal, exactly the kind of prey that triggers a great white's hunting instincts. The attack came from below with the explosive force typical of great white hunting behavior. The massive shark struck once, inflicting devastating injuries before immediately retreating. Classic great white behavior when the prey doesn't match their preferred food source. Marcus's emergency beacon activated automatically, immediately alerting his dive team to his location. But the single bite had caused massive trauma to his torso and legs. The support boat reached Marcus's location within 6 minutes, guided by his emergency beacon and his dive buddy who had surfaced nearby. The crew found Marcus floating unconscious, his wetsuit torn and bloodied from the shark's attack. Despite immediate medical attention and emergency evacuation, Marcus died from his injuries during the helicopter flight to the trauma center. The large seal population in the immediate area made it clear why the attack had occurred. Marcus had surfaced directly in the great white's natural hunting ground during peak feeding time. The incident led to immediate changes in military diving protocols, including mandatory marine wildlife briefings before all training exercises and improved rebreather maintenance procedures. Marcus's death served as a tragic reminder that even the most highly trained operators are vulnerable when equipment failure forces them to surface in dangerous waters. The morning of July 22, 2015 dawned with deceptive tranquility over New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The sky painted itself in soft pastels of pink and orange as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the scattered clouds, casting long shadows across the pristine white sand. Rebecca Walsh, a 34-year-old registered nurse from Jacksonville, had been looking forward to this vacation for months. Rebecca embodied the caring nature that made her exceptional at her job. She had spent the last 3 years working in the intensive care unit at Jacksonville Memorial Hospital, where her colleagues knew her as someone who never backed down from a challenge and always put others before herself. This week-long vacation at New Smyrna Beach represented more than just time off for Rebecca. After months of working double shifts during the hospital's staffing shortage, she desperately needed this break. Rebecca had been an avid swimmer since high school, maintaining her athletic build through her regular swimming sessions at the local YMCA. What Rebecca didn't fully appreciate was that New Smyrna Beach held the notorious distinction as the shark bite capital of the world, recording more unprovoked shark attacks than any other location globally. The night before Rebecca's final swim, local fishing enthusiasts had spent hours on the nearby pier, throwing fish parts and blood into the ocean to attract large game fish. This practice creates scent trails that can persist for hours and attract bull sharks, which are known for their aggressive nature and preference for shallow, murky water. Bull sharks are considered one of the 3 most dangerous shark species to humans, along with great white and tiger sharks. They can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, with a bite force of approximately 1,350 pounds per square inch. Unlike most sharks, bull sharks can tolerate both saltwater and freshwater, allowing them to venture into coastal areas where human activity is highest. As dawn broke on July 22nd, Rebecca followed her established routine. She slipped into her navy blue one-piece swimsuit and headed down to the beach. The water appeared slightly murkier than usual due to recent storms that had stirred up sediment, reducing visibility to about 2 feet below the surface. Perfect conditions for what marine biologists call a mistaken identity attack. Rebecca entered the water gradually, and for the first 15 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Unbeknownst to Rebecca, a mature female bull shark, approximately 6 feet in length and weighing close to 200 pounds, had been attracted to the area by the previous night's chumming activity and had been patrolling these waters since before dawn. The attack happened with shocking suddenness. Rebecca was peacefully swimming on the shallow water when the shark struck her on the side with lethal force, hitting her left thigh. The impact lifted her partially out of the water as the shark's teeth penetrated deep into her thigh muscle, severing her femoral artery, the major blood vessel that supplies the leg. When the femoral artery is severed, a person can lose consciousness within 60 to 90 seconds and die within 3 to 5 minutes without immediate medical intervention. Rebecca's scream echoed across the empty beach as she felt the shark's grip. The bull shark held on for approximately 10 to 15 seconds before releasing her. Typical behavior for this species when they realize their prey is not what they expected. Free from the shark's jaws but bleeding profusely, Rebecca attempted to swim toward shore. The water around her turned red with blood. However, the massive blood loss quickly began affecting her coordination and consciousness. 2 early morning joggers heard Rebecca's initial scream and saw her struggling in the surf. They immediately ran into the water, reaching her just as she was losing consciousness in about 3 feet of water. One jogger, a retired paramedic, immediately recognized the severity of her injuries and began applying direct pressure to the wound while his companion dialed 911. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes of the 911 call. However, Rebecca had already lost consciousness and showed signs of severe shock. Her blood pressure was critically low, and despite the medical team's efforts to control bleeding and restore blood volume, her condition continued to deteriorate. Rebecca Walsh was pronounced dead at Halifax Health Medical Center at 7:31 a.m., approximately 45 minutes after the attack. The official cause of death was blood loss due to femoral artery laceration from shark bite trauma. The morning of April 12, 2013 brought typical spring conditions to the waters 8 miles west of Farallon Islands, California. The water was characteristically cold for Northern California, hovering around 58 degrees Fahrenheit with moderate swells rolling in from the northwest. For most recreational divers, these conditions would be challenging. But for the Navy diving unit conducting training exercises in the area, it was just another day at the office. Sergeant Daniel Walsh, 26, checked his equipment one final time as he prepared for what should have been a routine underwater navigation exercise. Daniel's 3 years of Navy diving experience included over 150 training dives in locations ranging from the warm, clear waters of the Caribbean to the frigid, murky conditions of the North Atlantic. He had participated in ship hull inspections, underwater construction projects, and search and recovery operations that tested both his technical skills and his ability to work effectively under extreme stress. His dive logs read like a catalog of challenging conditions and successful missions. His colleagues respected his technical skills and his ability to remain calm under pressure, qualities that have made him a natural leader among the younger divers in his unit. The underwater navigation exercise planned for that April morning was considered routine by Navy standards. The exercise was being conducted in an area regularly used for Navy training, chosen for its consistent depth and relatively predictable conditions. What the training unit didn't know was that the area had recently become a feeding ground for elephant seals, massive marine mammals that were in the midst of their annual migration along the California coast. These seals created exactly the kind of marine activity that attracted the region's apex predators. Great white sharks in this region are among the largest and most aggressive of their species, with some individuals reaching lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their hunting strategy typically involves attacking from below with explosive force, often launching their massive bodies completely out of the water. At 9:45 a.m., Daniel began his descent for the navigation exercise, following standard procedures that have been refined through years of military diving operations. His primary air supply was functioning normally, and his backup regulator had been tested according to protocol. 25 minutes into the dive, Daniel's primary regulator began delivering inconsistent airflow, a potentially dangerous malfunction that required immediate attention. The regulator malfunction, while not immediately life-threatening, forced Daniel to surface earlier than planned and in a location approximately 200 yards from his designated pickup point. More critically, he surfaced in an area where elephant seals had been feeding intensively for several days. Daniel broke the surface and immediately activated his emergency beacon, following protocols designed to alert his support team to his location and condition. But Daniel was now floating alone in an area where great white sharks had been actively hunting, and his presence at the surface made him vulnerable to the kind of attack that had made these waters notorious among marine biologists. And one great white had been watching Daniel, likely a mature female estimated at over 18 feet in length based on the size of the bite radius later measured by investigators. The shark had probably been hunting in the area for days, attracted by the elephant seal activity, and Daniel's sudden appearance at the surface triggered the predatory response that millions of years of evolution had perfected. Daniel was floating on his back, checking his equipment and waiting for pickup when a great white shark struck him. The attack came from directly below, the classic hunting pattern of a great white shark pursuing what it perceived as a wounded seal. Daniel had no warning before the massive predator struck, its powerful jaws clamping down on his torso with a force that could crush a small boat. The shark's 300 serrated teeth penetrated deep into Daniel's chest and abdomen. The force of the attack launched both Daniel and the shark partially out of the water, a behavior known as breaching that great whites exhibit when attacking seals and sea lions. Daniel's emergency beacon continued transmitting throughout the attack, providing his rescue team with precise coordinates even as the horrific scene unfolded. The rescue team arrived approximately 8 minutes later but saw no signs of Daniel in the location. An extensive search and rescue effort was announced. Unfortunately, Daniel's body was recovered 40 minutes later by Coast Guard divers, who found him on the bottom in 65 feet of water. Daniel's death led to significant changes in military diving protocols, including mandatory marine wildlife briefings before all training operations and improved coordination with marine biology monitoring services. The Navy also implemented enhanced communication systems that provide real-time information about marine mammal activity in training areas, helping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The afternoon of May 22, 2017 brought perfect conditions to the waters 20 miles off Key Largo, Florida. Crystal clear visibility extended for dozens of feet in every direction, while gentle currents promised excellent hunting for the weekend spearfishermen who made the long boat ride to these productive offshore waters. For Antonio Silva, 29, it was exactly the kind of day he'd been hoping for when he planned this diving trip with his longtime friend Carlos. Antonio worked as a construction foreman during the week, but weekends belonged to the ocean. For 5 years, he had been perfecting his free diving technique and spearfishing skills, transforming from a nervous beginner into a confident hunter who could hold his breath for over 3 minutes and dive to depths that impressed even experienced spearfishermen. His Miami apartment was decorated with photos from successful trips, Antonio grinning beside large grouper, snapper, and other prize catches that he had taken with his custom spear gun. Friends described Antonio as methodical and safety conscious, the kind of person who researched dive sites thoroughly and never took unnecessary risks. He had completed advanced freediving courses and always dove with a buddy, understanding that the ocean's beauty masked very real dangers. His construction background had taught him to respect safety protocols, and he applied the same careful approach to his underwater hunting. Carlos, his regular diving partner, trusted Antonio's judgment completely, knowing that his friend's conservative approach had kept them both safe during dozens of previous trips. Antonio had been planning this particular trip for weeks, studying weather patterns and tide charts to ensure optimal conditions. He'd invested in new equipment recently, a more powerful spear gun and a specialized wetsuit designed for deep water hunting. His girlfriend often worried about his weekend adventures, but Antonio always returned with stories of incredible underwater encounters and enough fresh fish to feed their extended families. The two friends had made the long boat ride before dawn, timing their arrival to coincide with the peak feeding periods when large fish would be most active. They'd already had a successful morning, with Carlos landing a beautiful yellowtail snapper and Antonio taking a respectable grouper. The camaraderie between the two men was evident as they shared techniques and celebrated each other's successes. Their friendship strengthened by years of shared adventures beneath the waves. At 1:45 p.m., Antonio and Carlos were diving in their usual formation, staying within sight of each other while hunting along the coral reef structure that typically held large fish. The underwater currents, barely noticeable at the surface, were stronger than expected at depth. As Antonio pursued a large grouper into a coral canyon, the current caught him and swept him several hundred yards from Carlos before either man realized what was happening. When Antonio surfaced for air, he found himself alone in the vast expanse of blue water, his boat barely visible in the distance. Rather than panic, Antonio decided to continue hunting while he waited for Carlos to surface and spot him. The grouper he speared was magnificent, easily 30 pounds and exactly the kind of fish that made these long offshore trips worthwhile. But as the wounded fish struggled on his spear, its blood and erratic movements created a scent trail that would attract attention from one of the ocean's most opportunistic predators. Somewhere in the blue depths below, a 10-foot tiger shark had detected the disturbance. Tiger sharks are often called the wastebaskets of the sea because they'll eat almost anything, from fish and seals to license plates and tin cans found in their stomachs. Their incredibly powerful jaws can crush turtle shells, and their serrated teeth can slice through almost any material, making them one of the most dangerous sharks to encounter. Unlike great whites, which are more selective in their prey, tiger sharks investigate everything with their mouths, often leading to fatal encounters with humans. The tiger shark approached slowly, drawn by the scent of blood and the vibrations of the struggling fish. When Antonio surfaced for air 300 yards from his boat, he found himself face to face with one of the ocean's most unpredictable predators. The shark's initial interest was clearly in the speared fish, but Antonio's attempts to fend off the predator while maintaining control of his catch created a chaotic situation. The tiger shark struck with typical opportunistic behavior, grabbing the spear grouper but also catching Antonio's arm in its powerful jaws. The bite was devastating. Tiger sharks possess one of the strongest bite forces in the ocean, easily capable of severing limbs. Antonio's scream alerted Carlos, who immediately started the boat engine, but the damage was already done. The shark released Antonio after realizing he wasn't food, but the massive trauma to his arm had severed major arteries. Carlos reached his friend within 3 minutes, but Antonio was already unconscious from blood loss and shock. Despite immediate first aid and a frantic race back to shore, Antonio died from his injuries before they could reach medical help. His body was recovered, and the investigation showed classic tiger shark bite patterns. The predator had been attracted by the speared fish, but had accidentally caught Antonio in what marine biologists call competitive feeding behavior. The tragedy reinforced the critical importance of the buddy system in spearfishing, but it also highlighted how quickly situations can deteriorate when blood in the water attracts opportunistic predators. It was September 8, 2015, when the crystal-clear waters off Isle Wall Shoal off the coast of South Africa promised the perfect setting for celebration. The renowned diving destination, located 4 miles offshore from Umkomaas, stretched across a fossilized sand dune system teeming with marine life. Coral formations jutted from the sandy bottom at depths ranging from 60 to 90 feet, creating an underwater paradise that attracted divers from around the world. The warm Indian Ocean currents typically provide excellent visibility, making it an ideal location for both novice and experienced divers. Schools of tropical fish darted between the coral heads, while rays glided gracefully over the sandy patches. Tessa Rowe, a 52-year-old retired teacher from Manchester, had chosen this exotic location to celebrate her 25th wedding anniversary with her husband David, a 54-year-old certified dive instructor. Despite having only 20 log dives in her logbook, Tessa was determined to overcome her lingering fear of deep water and share this underwater adventure with the man she loved. David had carefully selected Isle Wall Shoal for its reputation as a relatively safe diving environment, hoping to build his wife's confidence beneath the waves. The couple had planned this trip for months, with Tessa dedicating countless hours to pool training and equipment familiarization. Their dive operator had assured them of calm conditions and excellent marine life sightings. The morning briefing had emphasized staying close to the group and maintaining proper buoyancy control. Bull sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of reaching lengths up to 11 feet and weighing over 500 pounds. These powerful hunters possess one of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom, with jaws capable of exerting pressure exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch. Unlike many shark species that prefer deeper waters, Bull sharks frequently patrol shallow coastal areas and are known for their aggressive territorial behavior. Their stocky build and broad, flat snouts make them perfectly adapted for hunting in murky waters where visibility is limited. These apex predators are particularly dangerous due to their unpredictable nature and tendency to investigate unusual disturbances in their territory. The morning dive began routinely as the group descended toward the reef system. However, unexpected strong currents began stirring up sediment from the ocean floor, rapidly reducing visibility from the usual 100 feet to less than 10 feet. The murky conditions created an underwater maze where familiar landmarks disappeared into the gloom. Tessa, already anxious about the depth, became increasingly disoriented as the group moved along the reef wall. When she lost sight of David's distinctive yellow fins, panic set in immediately. Violating fundamental diving safety protocols, Tessa broke away from the group and began ascending rapidly toward the surface. Her erratic movements and rapid ascent created vibrations that traveled through the water column. The 9-foot bull shark, patrolling the outer edges of the reef system, detected these irregular disturbances and moved to investigate. Tessa's panicked fin kicks and arm movements mimicked the struggling motions of an injured animal, triggering the predator's hunting instincts. The shark approached from Tessa's left side, striking with devastating precision. Its massive jaws clamped down on her left thigh with crushing force, the razor-sharp teeth penetrating deep into muscle and bone. The impact severed her femoral artery instantly, sending streams of blood into the surrounding water. The force of the attack knocked Tessa's regulator from her mouth, cutting off her air supply as she struggled against the predator's grip. The bull shark's powerful head movement shook Tessa violently from side to side, causing massive tissue damage throughout her leg. As blood continued to pour from the wound, the shark released its initial grip only to strike again, this time targeting her torso. The second bite punctured her buoyancy control device, causing rapid air loss and immediate negative buoyancy. Tessa began sinking toward the ocean floor as water flooded her damaged equipment. The combination of massive blood loss from the severed artery and drowning as seawater filled her lungs proved fatal within minutes. Her body descended through the murky water column, coming to rest on the sandy bottom at 80 feet depth. The bull shark, having inflicted mortal wounds, disappeared back into the gloom of the reef system. David and the dive group conducted an immediate search when they realized Tessa was missing. Her body was located 45 minutes later by the dive master, who followed a trail of blood and equipment debris to the ocean floor. Emergency ascent procedures were initiated, but resuscitation attempts proved unsuccessful. The South African maritime authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, examining equipment, dive procedures, and environmental conditions. Tessa's family released a statement expressing their grief while acknowledging her determination to conquer her fears. The local diving community implemented additional safety protocols for novice divers in challenging conditions. The evening of March 22, 2015 brought one of the most severe Pacific storms in years to California's coastal highways. Rain hammered the asphalt of Highway 1 with relentless fury, while winds howled through the towering redwoods that line the treacherous coastal route. For most travelers, it was a night to stay indoors. But for the Morrison family from Sacramento, it was just another obstacle on their annual spring break journey to Carmel. David Morrison, 42, gripped the steering wheel of their Honda Pilot with white knuckles, his methodical nature as an insurance adjuster keeping him focused on the road ahead. Beside him, Sarah, 38, a high school teacher known for her calm demeanor in crisis situations, monitored the GPS while keeping an eye on their two teenagers in the back seat. Emma, 16, and Jake, 14, were both honor students who had been looking forward to this family tradition for months. David had always prided himself on being a cautious driver, the kind of man who checked weather reports twice and kept emergency supplies in the trunk. Sarah often joked that his insurance background made him overly paranoid about risks, but she appreciated his attention to safety. The teenagers, despite their usual complaints about family trips, genuinely enjoyed these annual escapes from their busy academic lives. Emma was already planning to study marine biology in college, inspired by their previous coastal adventures, while Jake dreamed of becoming a photographer like his uncle. The family had been discussing their plans for the next day as they drove through the storm. Sarah had researched tide pools they could explore, while Emma excitedly talked about the marine life she hoped to photograph. Jake was more interested in the dramatic coastline shots he could capture with his new camera. Their conversation was filled with the easy familiarity of a family that genuinely enjoyed each other's company, making what was about to happen even more tragic. David had been driving this route for over a decade, but he'd never encountered conditions this severe. The storm had been building all day, and weather reports warned of possible flooding and debris on the coastal highways. Several times, Sarah had suggested they pull over and wait for the worst to pass, but David was confident in his driving abilities and eager to reach their hotel before the roads became completely impassable. At 7:20 p.m., as torrential rain reduced visibility to mere yards, David's worst nightmare materialized in his headlights. A massive redwood, weakened by the storm's fury, had crashed across both lanes of the highway. With no time to brake and nowhere to go, David made a split-second decision that would haunt the sole survivor forever. He swerved hard to the right, hoping to avoid the fallen giant, but the rain-slicked asphalt offered no grip for the heavy SUV. The Honda Pilot hydroplaned violently, spinning twice before crashing through the weakened guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal and wood. For a terrifying moment, the family was airborne, suspended 35 feet above the churning waters of Seal Cove. The impact with the frigid Pacific was devastating, but miraculously, all 4 family members survived the initial crash. As their vehicle began its rapid descent into the 52-degree water, David's emergency training kicked in. He helped his family escape through the sunroof, but the shock of the freezing water immediately began affecting their motor functions. The family found themselves separated by strong currents of water that would prove fatal within 15 to 20 minutes due to hypothermia alone. But Seal Cove was also known for its elephant seal population, which occasionally attracted great white sharks to the area. In the darkness below, a 17-foot great white had been patrolling these waters with senses so acute it could detect a single drop of blood from over a quarter-mile away. These ancient predators possess electroreceptors called ampullae of Lorenzini that can sense the electrical fields generated by a beating heart, making them nearly impossible to hide from once they begin hunting. Sarah, struggling in the dark water and wearing a dark jacket, caught the attention of this massive predator through the electrical impulses of her panicked heartbeat and the splashing that mimicked a wounded seal. The attack was swift and typical of great white behavior. A single devastating bite before the shark retreated to assess its prey. Sarah's scream was cut short as the massive predator struck, inflicting fatal injuries before disappearing back into the depths. David, already weakened from hypothermia, desperately tried to reach his children, but the combination of freezing water, strong currents, and shock proved overwhelming. Emma and Jake, both strong swimmers under normal circumstances, succumbed to hypothermia within minutes of their mother's attack. Coast Guard helicopters arrived 18 minutes later, their searchlights cutting through the storm to find David barely conscious, hypothermic, and clinging to debris. He was the sole survivor of a tragedy where the ocean's cold proved as deadly as its most feared predator. The pre-dawn hours on October 14, 2016 brought an unusual stillness to Monterey Bay, California. The marine layer had lifted earlier than usual, revealing a sky painted in deep purples and oranges as sunrise crept over the Santa Cruz Mountains. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its surface broken only by gentle, long-period swells. and this was a perfect day for Jake Morrison. At 26 years old, Jake embodied the California surfer archetype: sun-bleached hair, perpetually tanned skin, and an easy smile that masked a deep intelligence and profound respect for the ocean. As a surf instructor at Monterey Bay Surf Academy, Jake had built a reputation for his patience with beginners and ability to keep students safe in challenging conditions. His colleagues often said Jake could read the ocean like a book, predicting wave sets and identifying potential hazards with uncanny accuracy. The underwater Monterey Canyon, plunging to depths of over 12,000 feet just offshore, created upwelling currents that brought nutrient-rich water to the surface. However, this rich ecosystem also supported a significant population of great white sharks. October represents the peak season for great white activity in Monterey Bay, coinciding with elephant seal pupping season. Great white sharks are the ocean's apex predators, capable of growing over 20 feet long and weighing more than 5,000 pounds. They possess approximately 300 serrated teeth arranged in multiple rows, with a bite force that can exceed 4,000 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy involves ambush attacks from below, using their powerful tail to propel their massive bodies upward at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. On this particular morning, Jake had checked the surf forecast and discovered perfect conditions, clean waves in the head-high range. His wetsuit was a high-end, 4/3 millimeter full suit in solid black, designed for Northern California's cold water. From below, this sleek black silhouette would closely resemble a young elephant seal, the preferred prey of great whites in this area. For 30 minutes, Jake caught wave after perfect wave. The conditions exceeded the forecast, with clean faces and long rides that reminded him why he had fallen in love with surfing. What Jake didn't know was that he was being observed. Approximately 50 feet below, a 14-foot great white shark had been patrolling the area since before dawn. This was a mature female, estimated to weigh close to 2,000 pounds, attracted to the area by scent trails from a nearby seal colony. Jake, who was taking a rest in shallow water, was sitting on his board when suddenly the shark launched itself with explosive force, its jaws clamping down on Jake's left leg and hip with a bite force exceeding 4,000 pounds per square inch. The bite caused immediate and massive trauma. The shark's teeth penetrated deep into Jake's leg and hip, severing the femoral artery, crushing the femur bone, and causing devastating tissue damage. The shark released Jake after approximately 10 to 15 seconds and disappeared back into the depths. However, the damage was already fatal. Jake's scream of agony echoed across the empty ocean. But despite the severity of his injuries, adrenaline and his years of ocean experience gave him a brief window of opportunity. Jake began paddling toward shore with desperate determination, using only his arms, as his injured leg made kicking impossible. The femoral artery injury meant he was losing blood at a rate of nearly 1 liter per minute, and that massive blood loss quickly began affecting Jake's system. Jake reached the shore, but the combination of blood loss and physical effort overwhelmed his system. Jake lost consciousness on the shore. A jogger on the beach, seeing Jake laying unconscious and bleeding heavily, ran to him and called 911. Emergency responders arrived at the area approximately 30 minutes after the attack. But even with great effort, Jake Morrison was pronounced dead at the scene at 6:47 a.m. The official cause of death was exsanguination due to femoral artery laceration and massive tissue trauma from a shark bite. It was August 14, 2017, off the pristine coast of Maui, Hawaii, where the annual Pacific Deep Sea Fishing Tournament drew competitors from around the globe. The crystal clear water stretched endlessly under the blazing afternoon sun, with gentle swells rolling beneath the scattered fleet of charter boats positioned strategically along the continental shelf. 28-year-old Blair Kingston stood on the deck of his team's vessel, the Salt Runner, his weathered hands gripping the rail as he surveyed the competition spread across the horizon. A commercial fisherman by trade, Kingston had built his reputation on aggressive tactics and calculated risks that often paid off in prize-winning catches. His three-man crew had traveled from California specifically for this tournament. Their boat loaded with high-end equipment and years of collective experience targeting the largest pelagic species. The waters around Maui are known for their abundant marine life, including massive yellowfin tuna that could weigh over 200 pounds, making them the ultimate prize for serious competitors willing to venture into deeper, more dangerous waters where trophy fish congregated. Kingston's team had already landed several smaller catches, but they needed something spectacular to claim the tournament's grand prize and the accompanying $50,000 purse that would validate their risky journey. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, reaching lengths of up to 18 feet and weighing over 1,400 pounds. These apex hunters possess rows of razor-sharp serrated teeth designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Their powerful jaws can exert crushing force exceeding 6,000 pounds per square inch, while their keen senses allow them to detect blood in the water from miles away. Tiger sharks are particularly dangerous in Hawaiian waters, where they patrol the deeper channels between islands hunting for wounded or distressed prey. Their distinctive stripe pattern gives them their name, though these markings fade with age as the sharks mature into even more dangerous predators. These sharks are known for their indiscriminate feeding habits, consuming everything from sea turtles to marine mammals with equal ferocity. When Kingston's team successfully hooked a massive yellowfin tuna, the fish fought violently against the line, thrashing and bleeding as it was pulled toward the surface. The 200-pound tuna broke free just as it reached the boat, its wounded body trailing blood as it began to sink back into the depths. Without hesitation, Kingston stripped off his shirt and dove into the warm Hawaiian waters, determined to retrieve the valuable catch that could secure their tournament victory. What he failed to notice was the 14-foot tiger shark that had been following the bleeding fish's scent trail for several minutes, drawn by the unmistakable smell of distress and injury. As Kingston swam downward toward the sinking tuna, the shark approached from below, its massive form cutting silently through the blue water. Kingston grabbed the fish with both hands, struggling to lift its dead weight toward the surface when the tiger shark struck with explosive force. The initial attack caught Kingston's right leg just below the knee, the shark's serrated teeth slicing completely through bone and muscle in a single devastating bite. The severed limb separated instantly, sending clouds of blood billowing through the water as major arteries were severed. Kingston released the tuna and attempted to swim toward his boat, but the massive blood loss and shock had already begun to weaken him significantly. The tiger shark, now in full predatory mode, circled back for a second attack, its primitive brain driven by the overwhelming scent of blood. The second strike caught Kingston across his lower back and abdomen, the shark's powerful jaws crushing his spine and rupturing internal organs. The crushing force of the bite caused catastrophic internal bleeding, while the serrated teeth tore through vital structures. Kingston's body went limp as his spinal cord was severed, and within 2 minutes, massive blood loss caused him to lose consciousness and drown in the crimson-stained waters. The Coast Guard recovered Kingston's body 3 hours later, launching an immediate investigation into the tournament's safety protocols and water entry procedures. His family released a brief statement requesting privacy during their grief, while tournament officials implemented new safety measures requiring protective equipment for water entry. The incident marked the first shark fatality in the tournament's 15-year history, sending shockwaves through the competitive fishing community and raising questions about risk management in extreme sport fishing competitions. Local authorities temporarily suspended similar tournaments pending comprehensive safety reviews and protocol updates. The Hawaiian Department of Land and Natural Resources issued new guidelines for all future fishing competitions in state waters. The morning of November 18, 2017 brought perfect conditions to the deep waters 45 miles southeast of Key Largo, Florida. The sun blazed overhead in the cloudless sky, its rays penetrating the crystal clear water to depths that made the ocean floor visible even from the surface. For Marcus Thompson, 39, preparing his gear on the deck of his friend's 28-foot boat, it looked like the perfect day to pursue the large pelagic fish that inhabited the deep blue waters of the Florida Straits. Marcus embodied the rugged independence that characterized serious spear fishermen. His weathered face and permanent tan told the story of 15 years spent pursuing fish in some of Florida's most challenging waters, from the shallow flats of the Everglades to the deep blue waters where the Gulf Stream carried both opportunity and danger. Marcus approached spearfishing with the same methodical precision he brought to engine repair. Friends often joke that Marcus treated his spearfishing gear better than his truck, but they also acknowledged that his attention to detail had kept him safe during thousands of dives in challenging conditions. The trip that November morning was meant to be a relaxing weekend adventure with two close friends, both experienced divers who shared Marcus's passion for deep water hunting. The area they chose was known for its abundant marine life, but also for the strong currents that could separate divers from their boat if they weren't careful. At 1:30 p.m., the three friends began their diving rotation, with one person staying on the boat while two dove together, following the buddy system that had kept them safe during years of deep water hunting. The current was stronger than expected, but not dangerous for experienced divers who understood how to work with the water rather than fighting against it. Marcus made several successful dives during the first hour, bringing up smaller fish while scouting for the large amberjack that was the day's primary target. Then he finally spotted a massive amberjack cruising near a coral head in 180 feet of water. His shot was perfect, but the wounded amberjack, instead of dying quickly, began a powerful run that created exactly the kind of blood trail that could attract predators from considerable distances. What Marcus didn't know was that a large bull shark had been patrolling the area, drawn by the abundant bait fish that congregated around the underwater structure. Bull sharks, unlike their oceanic cousins, are comfortable in both shallow and deep waters. And this 9-foot female had been hunting in the area for several days. The blood trail for Marcus's speared fish triggered every predatory instinct the shark possessed. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous shark species to humans, not because of their size, but because of their aggressive nature and their tendency to inhabit the same waters where people fish and dive. These stocky predators possess powerful jaws filled with triangular teeth designed for grabbing and tearing prey, and their broad, flat snouts are packed with sensory organs that make them incredibly effective hunters in murky or deep water. Marcus was at a depth of 40 feet, ascending with his catch, when the bull shark struck. The attack came from his blind spot, the predator having approached from below and behind, while Marcus focused on controlling his struggling catch. The shark's jaws clamped down on Marcus's thigh with crushing force, its teeth penetrating deep into muscle and severing the femoral artery. The bull shark, having delivered what was likely an investigative bite, released him and began circling, attracted by the increasing amount of blood in the water. Marcus knew he was in mortal danger and began swimming desperately toward the surface, but he was already going into shock from massive blood loss. Tony and Rick, watching from the boat, saw the blood cloud expanding in the clear water and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. They could see Marcus ascending rapidly, trailing blood, with a large shark circling below him. Tony jumped into the water with a bang stick, while Rick started the engines and maneuvered the boat toward Marcus's position. Marcus broke the surface 40 yards from the boat, gasping for air and calling weakly for help. The bull shark had followed him to the surface and was becoming increasingly aggressive, attracted by the massive amount of blood Marcus was losing. Tony reached Marcus first, using the bang stick to drive the shark away, while Rick brought the boat alongside. They pulled Marcus from the water, but the damage was already done. The bull shark's bite had severed his femoral artery, and despite their desperate attempts to control the bleeding with tourniquets and pressure bandages, Marcus had lost too much blood. He remained conscious long enough to tell his friends he loved them, then lost consciousness as they raced toward shore. Marcus Thompson died from massive blood loss before they could reach the marina, becoming another tragic reminder of the risks inherent in deep water spearfishing. The incident led to enhanced safety recommendations for spearfishermen, including the use of shark shields, improved first aid training focused on arterial bleeding, and better communication equipment for emergency situations. But perhaps most importantly, it reinforced the critical need for the buddy system and immediate surfacing after spearing fish in deep water. The morning of March 19, 2014 brought perfect Caribbean weather to Nassau, Bahamas. The sun rose over the harbor, painting the sky in brilliant coral and gold as gentle trade winds carried the sweet scent of frangipane blossoms across crystal clear waters. Water temperature held steady at 78 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough for extended swimming without protective gear. Jennifer Adams had been dreaming of this moment for over a year, ever since she and 3 college roommates decided to celebrate their 5-year reunion with a Bahamas trip. At 28 years old, Jennifer embodied the enthusiasm and optimism that made her an effective elementary school teacher in Columbus, Ohio. Teaching 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary School had been Jennifer's dream job since graduating from Ohio State University 6 years earlier. But Jennifer's dedication came at a personal cost. She rarely took time off during the school year, often working weekends to prepare lessons and grade papers. Growing up in the Midwest, Jennifer had limited ocean swimming experience. Her childhood summers were spent at Lake Erie and inland lakes, where the biggest concern was avoiding zebra mussel shells. The concept of marine predators was largely theoretical. The group had arrived in Nassau 3 days earlier, staying at a mid-range resort offering direct beach access and water sport activities. Although what Jennifer and her friends didn't realize was that their chosen swimming area had been significantly impacted by human activities that altered local marine life behavior. For over a decade, local fishermen had used a small dock about 200 yards from the resort's beach as a fish cleaning station, processing daily catches before taking them to market. Caribbean reef sharks typically grow 6 to 8 feet in length and are generally considered one of the less aggressive species. They normally avoid human contact and feed primarily on small fish, squid, and crustaceans. However, when they become conditioned to expect food in specific areas, their behavior can change, making them more likely to investigate swimmers who enter their territory. That morning began normally. Jennifer and her friends decided to spend the morning at the beach before their afternoon rum distillery excursion. She wore a bright yellow bikini purchased specifically for this trip, thinking the vibrant color would look great in vacation photos. What she didn't know was that bright colors, particularly yellow, can attract shark attention, as they may mistake them for the coloration of distressed fish or other prey species. For the first 15 minutes, Jennifer's swim was everything she had hoped. The water was so clear she could see tropical fish swimming below, their bright colors creating a living kaleidoscope that took her breath away. But what Jennifer couldn't see was the 5-foot Caribbean reef shark that had been attracted to the area by the familiar scent of fish blood from the nearby cleaning station. This particular shark had been conditioned over several years to associate this area with feeding opportunities. Jennifer's first indication that something was wrong came when she noticed small tropical fish that had been swimming around her suddenly disappeared. The water, which had been alive with colorful marine life moments before, became eerily empty. Confused by the sudden absence of fish but not yet alarmed, Jennifer continued swimming, assuming her movements had simply scared the fish away. She was about 100 yards from shore, in approximately 6 feet of water, when she felt something brush against her leg. The contact was gentle at first, almost like seaweed or debris floating in the current. But when Jennifer looked down, she saw the unmistakable shape of a shark circling below her. Jennifer's panicked movements, thrashing arms, and rapid kicking created exactly the kind of distress prey signals that trigger feeding responses in sharks. The Caribbean reef shark, which had been investigating her presence cautiously, suddenly perceived her as wounded prey and shifted from investigative behavior to predatory action. The attack was swift and decisive. The shark struck Jennifer's leg just below the knee, its teeth designed for gripping and tearing rather than the cutting action of larger species. The bite caused immediate severe damage to her calf muscle, tearing through skin, muscle, and blood vessels. Jennifer's scream of terror and agony carried across the water to the beach, where her friends immediately recognized something was terribly wrong. Sarah, the most water-confident of the group, began swimming toward Jennifer while Michelle and Amanda ran to alert resort lifeguards and beach staff. The shark, having delivered its initial bite, released Jennifer and backed away slightly. Behavior typical of Caribbean reef sharks when they realize their prey isn't what they expected. However, the damage was already done. The bite had severed the posterior tibial artery, creating a wound that was bleeding profusely. Jennifer, despite panic and excruciating pain, managed to begin swimming toward shore. But the blood flowing from her wound was creating a scent trail that continued to stimulate the shark's predatory instincts. The shark, drawn back by blood and Jennifer's continued distressed movements, circled for a second approach. The second bite targeted Jennifer's right ankle and foot, causing additional severe trauma damage and severing more blood vessels. The combined blood loss from both wounds now exceeded 1 liter per minute, rapidly pushing Jennifer toward hypovolemic shock. Sarah reached Jennifer just after the second attack, managing to get her arms around Jennifer and began pulling her toward shore, screaming for help as she struggled against the current and Jennifer's increasingly dead weight. The resort's emergency response was swift and professional. Lifeguards reached the two women within minutes, using a rescue boat to get Jennifer out of the water and onto the beach, where resort medical staff could begin treatment. Jennifer remained conscious during the initial treatment, even managing to speak to her friends and medical personnel working to stabilize her condition. She asked repeatedly about the shark, whether it was still in the water, and whether her friends were safe. Emergency medical services transported Jennifer to Princess Margaret Hospital in Nassau. Surgeons managed to repair the severed arteries and control the bleeding. But complications began developing within hours of surgery. The massive blood loss and trauma had put enormous stress on Jennifer's cardiovascular system. Despite receiving multiple units of blood transfusions, her body began showing signs of multiple organ dysfunction syndrome. Despite the medical team's heroic efforts, Jennifer's condition continued to deteriorate. Jennifer Adams died at 11:23 p.m. on March 19, 2014, approximately 12 hours after the shark attack. The evening of October 15, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the Pacific Ocean, 85 miles off the coast of Monterey Bay, California. A gentle breeze carried the salt air across calm seas, while the full moon cast a silver pathway across the water's surface. For most passengers aboard the luxury cruise liner, it was the kind of romantic evening that made anniversary celebrations unforgettable. Elena Rodriguez, 34, stood on the balcony of her 7th-deck suite, mesmerized by the moonlit ocean stretching endlessly in all directions. Elena worked as an accountant in Phoenix, a meticulous professional who approached everything in her life with careful planning and attention to detail. Her husband often joked that she could balance a checkbook blindfolded and organize a filing system that would make librarians weep with joy. She was also a recreational swimmer who had competed in high school, though she hadn't been in serious training for years. Her love for the water had drawn her to this Pacific cruise, a 7-day journey she and her husband had booked to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary. The couple had saved for 2 years to afford the balcony suite, splurging on the luxury they rarely allowed themselves. Elena's husband, Miguel, was a construction foreman whose weathered hands told the story of decades spent building homes for other families. He was practical where Elena was romantic, cautious where she was spontaneous. At 2:15 a.m., while Miguel slept peacefully inside their cabin, Elena stepped onto the balcony to capture photos of the moonlit ocean. She leaned against the railing to get the perfect angle for a selfie with the moonlit ocean behind her. She stretched further than she should have, trying to capture both herself and the magnificent seascape in one frame. The ship hit a moderate swell at exactly the wrong moment. Elena, leaning far over the railing with her phone extended, lost her balance as the deck tilted unexpectedly beneath her feet. Her free hand grasped desperately for the railing, but momentum and gravity had already taken control. Miguel woke to the sound of Elena's scream cutting through the night air, followed by the terrible silence that told him something was catastrophically wrong. Miguel rushed to the balcony to find it empty, Elena's sandals still sitting where she had kicked them off earlier. His emergency call brought the ship's crew running within 90 seconds. But maritime safety protocols meant the massive vessel couldn't simply stop and turn around. The ship's engines went into full reverse while the captain initiated man-overboard procedures. But it took 12 agonizing minutes for the 900-foot vessel to halt its forward momentum and begin turning back toward Elena's position. Elena's 70-foot fall into the Pacific knocked her unconscious immediately, but she survived the impact. The 62-degree water was a shock to her system even through her pajamas, and she remained conscious briefly as hypothermia began setting in. Disoriented and injured from the fall, she struggled to stay afloat in the moderate swells, her cries for help lost in the vast darkness surrounding the distant lights of the cruise ship. When the rescue boats finally reached the GPS coordinates marking Elena's fall location, they found blood in the water and fragments of her torn pajamas floating on the surface. The area where Elena had fallen was within the Red Triangle, a notorious region off the California coast where great white sharks congregate to hunt seals and sea lions. The blood from Elena's impact injuries, likely a broken nose and lacerations from hitting the water, had attracted a predator from the depths below. The great white sharks of California's coast are apex predators that have ruled these waters for millions of years. Weighing up to 5,000 pounds and measuring over 20 feet in length, they possess sensory systems so advanced they can detect a single drop of blood from miles away. Their 300 serrated teeth, arranged in multiple rows that continuously regenerate, can tear through flesh and bone with surgical precision. When hunting, they often strike from below with explosive force. Their attacks so sudden that prey has no time to react or escape. Elena, weakened by her injuries and struggling with hypothermia, had been floating helplessly when the great white struck from below. The attack was swift and decisive. The massive predator's jaws clamped down on her torso, and she disappeared beneath the surface without another sound. The shark, likely mistaking the injured and struggling woman for a wounded seal, had responded to millions of years of evolutionary programming. Elena's body was never recovered from the Pacific's depths. The Coast Guard continued searching for 2 days, but the vast ocean had claimed her completely. Miguel returned to Phoenix a broken man, carrying only the memories of their 10 years together and the crushing weight of what-if scenarios that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The cruise line implemented enhanced balcony safety barriers and mandatory safety briefings about the dangers of leaning over railings. But for Miguel, these changes came too late to matter. The morning of August 17, 2016 dawned with deceptive beauty over New Smyrna Beach, Florida. Golden sunlight painted the horizon as gentle waves rolled toward shore, creating the perfect conditions that had made this stretch of coastline famous among surfers worldwide. But beneath the surface, overnight storms had stirred up the water, reducing visibility and bringing schools of baitfish dangerously close to shore. Conditions that would prove dangerous for one local surfer. Jake Martinez, 24, had been part of New Smyrna Beach's tight-knit surfing community for 8 years. Working at the local surf shop gave him access to the best equipment and inside knowledge about wave conditions. But more importantly, it connected him to a lifestyle he genuinely loved. Friends describe Jake as the embodiment of the laid-back surfer culture. Sun-bleached hair, perpetual tan, and an infectious enthusiasm for riding waves that made him popular with both locals and tourists who visited the shop. Despite his easygoing nature, Jake was known for his dedication to the sport. He would often arrive at the beach before dawn, checking conditions and waxing his board, while most of the town still slept. His co-workers respected his wave knowledge and often asked his advice about the best times to surf. Jake lived in a small apartment just 2 blocks from the beach, and his morning routine rarely varied. Coffee, check the surf report, grab his board, and paddle out before the crowds arrived. Jake had been particularly excited about this morning's session because the overnight storm had created the kind of clean, powerful waves that only came a few times each year. He'd been tracking the weather system for days, watching as it moved up the coast and generated the perfect combination of wind and swell. His girlfriend had teased him about his obsession with wave forecasts, but Jake lived for these moments, when all the conditions aligned perfectly. On this particular morning, Jake made a decision that his experience should have warned him against. Heavy overnight rains had created the murky water conditions that bull sharks prefer for hunting. Local fishing boats had been active the previous evening, and there had been 2 bull shark sightings reported just days earlier. At 6:15 a.m., Jake paddled out alone in the water that looked deceptively inviting. The waves were clean and consistent, exactly the kind of conditions he lived for, but the visibility was severely compromised by the storm runoff. As he sat on his board 100 yards from shore waiting for the perfect set, Jake was unaware that somewhere beneath him lurked one of the ocean's most aggressive predators. Bull sharks are unique among their species for their ability to tolerate fresh water, often swimming far up rivers and into brackish estuaries where the murky conditions give them a hunting advantage. Unlike great whites, which rely primarily on ambush tactics, bull sharks are known for their territorial aggression and willingness to attack anything they perceive as a threat or potential prey. Jake felt something bump his leg beneath the surface, the investigative behavior typical of bull sharks in murky water. The 7-foot bull shark struck with a single powerful bite to Jake's right leg, severing major arteries and causing immediate massive blood loss. Unlike the prolonged attacks often depicted in movies, this was the reality of most shark encounters. One bite, then the shark retreated, likely realizing Jake wasn't its preferred prey. But the damage was done. Jake's femoral artery had been severed, and he was losing blood at a rate that would prove fatal within minutes. Jake managed to scream for help and began paddling desperately toward shore, leaving a trail of blood in the water behind them. Early morning beachgoers heard his cries and immediately called 911, while 2 experienced surfers paddled out to help. They reached Jake within 4 minutes, but he was already going into shock from blood loss. Despite their efforts to apply pressure to the wound and get him to shore, Jake lost consciousness before they reached the beach. Paramedics worked frantically to save Jake's life, but the massive blood loss from the severed artery proved fatal. He died at the scene, surrounded by the surfing community that had embraced him as one of their own. The attack was typical of bull shark behavior in murky water, a single investigative bite that, tragically, struck a major blood vessel. It was April 15, 2014, when the crystal clear water surrounding Neptune Islands off South Australia's coast became the scene of a devastating encounter. The remote archipelago, located 35 miles southwest of Port Lincoln, served as a critical breeding ground for Australian fur seals. Towering limestone cliffs rose from the ocean depths, creating underwater caverns and kelp forests that attracted diverse marine life. The island's isolation made them perfect for scientific research, drawing marine biologists from across the globe to study the complex ecosystem. Logan Price, a 34-year-old marine biologist, had established a temporary research station on the largest island 3 weeks prior. His doctoral thesis focused on seal population dynamics, requiring extensive underwater observations during the critical pupping season. Price possessed 12 years of diving experience and held advanced certifications in technical diving and underwater photography. His methodical approach to research had earned him respect among colleagues, though some questioned his tendency to push safety boundaries when pursuing rare specimens. The morning conditions appeared ideal, with calm seas and excellent visibility extending beyond 60 feet. Price made the fatal decision to conduct a solo spearfishing expedition near the main seal colony, directly violating established safety protocols. Weather services had issued warnings about increased shark activity during pupping season, when blood and afterbirth in the water attracted predators. His research permit specifically prohibited solo diving operations, yet Price believed his experience justified the risk. He entered the water at dawn, carrying his custom spear gun and wearing a black wetsuit that would prove catastrophically similar to a seal's silhouette. Great white sharks represent the ocean's most formidable predators, reaching lengths exceeding 20 feet and weights of over 5,000 pounds. These apex hunters possess extraordinary sensory capabilities, detecting electrical fields generated by living creatures and sensing blood concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. Their triangular serrated teeth can exert bite forces exceeding 4,000 pounds per square inch, easily crushing bone and severing limbs. Great whites typically hunt from below, using their powerful tails to propel themselves upward at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour during attacks. At approximately 40 feet depth, Price focused intently on a large snapper near the rocky bottom, unaware of the 18-foot great white ascending silently from the deeper waters below. The massive predator, likely attracted by the seal colony's activity and Price's movements, struck with devastating precision. The initial impact crushed Price's ribcage, the shark's conical snout delivering tremendous blunt force trauma before its jaws clamped down on his torso. Both lungs were punctured instantly as broken ribs pierced the delicate tissue, filling his chest cavity with blood. The shark's powerful jaws, lined with razor-sharp teeth, penetrated deep into Price's abdomen and chest. As the predator shook him violently from side to side, massive internal trauma occurred. Price's spear gun tumbled toward the ocean floor as his body went limp from shock and blood loss. The great white released its grip momentarily before attacking again, this time targeting his left shoulder. The second bite completely severed Price's left arm, the shark's teeth slicing through bone, muscle, and major arteries with surgical precision. Blood poured from the catastrophic wounds, creating a crimson cloud in the clear water. The massive blood loss caused Price's blood pressure to plummet rapidly, leading to hypovolemic shock. The shark delivered a final fatal bite to his lower abdomen, its teeth penetrating vital organs including the liver and intestines. The damage to major blood vessels caused immediate and irreversible hemorrhaging. Price's body sank slowly toward the rocky bottom as the great white disappeared into the depths, leaving behind only scattered equipment and a spreading pool of blood. Coast Guard divers recovered Price's remains 3 hours later after his research vessel's automated distress beacon activated when he failed to surface. The recovery operation required extreme caution due to the continued shark presence in the area. Marine authorities launched an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding the attack, focusing on protocol violations and safety procedures at remote research sites. Price's death sent shockwaves through the marine biology community, prompting universities worldwide to review solo diving policies. The Neptune Islands incident became a sobering reminder of the ocean's inherent dangers, even for experienced professionals. It was July 3, 2018, 15 miles offshore from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, where the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly in all directions under the blazing afternoon sun. The charter boat Sea Dreams bobbed gently in the deep blue waters, surrounded by nothing but ocean as far as the eye could see. The water here plunged to depths exceeding 3,000 feet, creating the perfect hunting grounds for pelagic predators that rarely venture close to shore. The sea conditions were ideal, with minimal wind and crystal clear visibility extending over 100 feet into the azure depths below. Noah Vexler, a 45-year-old accountant from Phoenix, had brought his family on this deep-sea fishing charter as part of their summer vacation. His wife Carmen and their two teenagers, aged 16 and 14, had been looking forward to this trip for months. Noah was known for his cautious nature, meticulously planning every detail of their family adventures. But he harbored a secret fear of open ocean swimming that he desperately wanted to overcome. Despite being a strong pool swimmer who could easily complete 50 laps at his local gym, he had never ventured into open ocean waters. The charter captain had recommended this particular spot for its abundant marine life, warning passengers that the deep waters attracted large predators following the boat's fish scraps. The morning's fishing had been exceptionally successful, with multiple yellowfin tuna and mahi-mahi caught, their blood and remains creating an irresistible scent trail in the water. The oceanic white-tip shark is one of the ocean's most formidable predators, reaching lengths of up to 13 feet and weighing over 400 pounds. These sharks are distinguished by their rounded, white-tipped fins and bold, persistent hunting behavior in open ocean environments. Unlike coastal sharks that typically avoid human contact, oceanic whitetips are known for their curious and aggressive nature around boats, often following vessels for hours while scavenging for food scraps. Their powerful jaws contain rows of triangular serrated teeth designed for gripping and tearing flesh, while their muscular bodies allow them to maintain a relentless pursuit of prey in deep water. These apex predators are responsible for more open ocean attacks on humans than any other shark species, earning them a fearsome reputation among marine biologists. When the charter boat stopped for lunch, Noah made the fatal decision to prove his swimming abilities by jumping into the crystal clear waters. Despite Captain Rodriguez's explicit warnings about swimming in such deep, predator-rich waters, Noah convinced himself that a quick swim would help him conquer his fears. The 11-foot oceanic whitetip had been shadowing the boat for over an hour, drawn by the steady stream of fish blood and scraps being thrown overboard during the morning's fishing activities. The massive predator had been circling at a depth of approximately 30 feet, its distinctive silhouette barely visible from the surface. As Noah swam approximately 50 yards from the vessel, the massive shark approached from the depths below, its distinctive white-tipped fins cutting through the water with deadly precision. The initial attack came without warning, as the oceanic whitetip's powerful jaws clamped down on Noah's left shoulder and arm. The shark's rounded teeth penetrated deep into muscle and bone, causing immediate fractures to his humerus and severe lacerations to his deltoid and bicep muscles. Noah's screams echoed across the water as blood began streaming from the wounds, creating a crimson cloud that only intensified the predator's feeding response. The thrashing in blood triggered the shark's relentless hunting instincts, characteristic of this species' persistent attack pattern. The oceanic whitetip struck again, this time targeting Noah's torso with devastating force. Its jaws penetrated his chest cavity, crushing ribs and puncturing vital organs, including his left lung and liver. The shark's powerful bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch caused catastrophic internal damage as it shook its massive head from side to side. Noah's desperate attempts to fight back only encouraged the predator's continued assault, as oceanic whitetips are known for their bold, unyielding behavior once they begin feeding. The shark delivered multiple successive attacks over the next several minutes, each bite causing additional trauma to Noah's already devastated body. Blood loss became massive as major arteries were severed, while the punctured lung caused rapid respiratory failure. The combination of severe hemorrhaging, organ damage, and shock proved fatal within 7 minutes of the initial attack, as Noah's body went limp in the crimson-stained waters. The Mexican Coast Guard launched an immediate investigation into the incident, while local authorities temporarily suspended deep-sea fishing charters in the area. Noah's family was devastated by the tragedy, with his wife Carmen later establishing a foundation promoting ocean safety awareness. The incident marked the third shark fatality in Mexican waters that year, prompting renewed discussions about swimming protocols during charter boat excursions. The morning of August 14, 2014, dawned with deceptive beauty at Ponce Inlet, Florida. The sky blazed with streaks of orange and pink as the sun climbed above the Atlantic horizon, painting the water in brilliant hues that made the ocean look like liquid fire. For Tyler Brooks, 28, watching the conditions from his apartment window just 2 blocks from the beach, it looked like the perfect start to what he hoped would be an epic dawn session. Tyler embodied everything people imagined when they thought of a Florida surfer. Sun-bleached hair that never seemed to need styling, a perpetual tan that spoke of countless hours in the water, and an easy smile that made them instantly likable to customers at the surf shop where he worked. He had been riding waves along Florida's coast for 12 years, ever since his family moved to New Smyrna Beach when he was 16. What started as a way to fit in at a new school had become his passion, his profession, and his identity. Ponce Inlet had been Tyler's regular morning spot for the past 3 years. The break offered consistent waves and was usually uncrowded during the early hours, exactly what Tyler preferred for his pre-work sessions. What Tyler didn't fully appreciate, despite his years of experience, was how dramatically overnight storms could change the ocean's character. The previous evening had brought heavy rains and strong winds that stirred up sediment and debris, creating the murky water conditions that made Ponce Inlet particularly dangerous. The storm had also driven massive schools of baitfish into the shallow waters near the inlet, creating a feeding frenzy that attracted predators from the deeper offshore waters. At 6:30 a.m., Tyler paddled out into conditions that looked perfect from shore, but told a different story once he was in the water. The visibility was severely limited. The water had a greenish-brown tint that spoke of stirred-up sediment and organic matter, exactly the kind of conditions that made it difficult for both surfers and sharks to distinguish between different objects in the water. For nearly an hour, Tyler enjoyed what felt like a private surf session. The waves were clean and consistent, breaking with the kind of power and shape that made all the early morning effort worthwhile. He caught wave after wave, each ride reinforcing his decision to brave the murky conditions. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning haze and warming the air, creating the perfect Florida morning that locals treasured and tourists paid thousands to experience. But unbeknownst to him, a bull shark had been tracking his movements. A 7-foot female, drawn to the area by the abundance of baitfish and the vibrations created by Tyler's surfboard cutting through the water. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous species to humans, not because they're the largest or most aggressive, but because they frequent the same shallow, murky waters where people swim and surf. The attack came without warning. Tyler felt the sudden crushing pressure around his left leg below the knee, followed immediately by searing pain that shot through his entire body. The shark's teeth, designed for gripping and tearing, penetrated deep into his calf muscle, severing the major artery and crushing bone. Tyler's scream echoed across the water as he instinctively began paddling toward shore, his surfboard becoming a life raft in his desperate attempt to escape. Despite his desperate paddling toward shore, Tyler was already going into shock from massive blood loss. Early morning beachgoers, including several joggers and dog walkers, heard Tyler's screams and immediately dialed 911. The Volusia County Beach Patrol, experienced in water rescues and shark attack responses, launched their rescue watercraft within 4 minutes of receiving the emergency call. But by the time lifeguards reached Tyler in waist-deep water, he had already lost consciousness from blood loss and was floating face down next to his surfboard. The rescue team pulled Tyler from the water and immediately began emergency medical treatment on the beach. Despite their quick response and professional medical care, he never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead 20 minutes later at Halifax Health Medical Center. The attack prompted immediate changes to beach safety protocols in Volusia County. Enhanced dawn patrol warnings were implemented, with lifeguards beginning their shifts earlier to monitor conditions during the popular early morning surf sessions. Emergency response procedures were also improved, with additional rescue equipment positioned at high-risk locations and faster communication systems installed to reduce response times. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.